Welcome to the Week 13 IDP Rankings show here on IDP Plus Trends. As always, this week on this episode, we're going to drop the top 15 defensive linemen, linebackers, and defensive backs as a preview here for you viewers and listeners. If you are a subscriber, you can check out the entire list. Go to our website at idpplus.com if you'd like to check out that entire list. And if you are not a subscriber, you can get 20% off your subscription starting this month when you use the promo code PROPS at our checkout. If you want the hot link straight to the checkout, it is idpplus.com/membership and use the promo code PROPS to get your 20% off. Hey, we're going to start sharing the screen, get right into it here. We're going to talk about some defensive linemen for Week 13. Once you're at the website, as you can see, I'm logged into my account. I'm going to hover over weekly, the DL, weekly defensive lineman, to see our top 15. That's what I'll show, but we have, I believe it's over 50 rankings here this week for Week 13. This list is brought to you by Justin Fry. You can find him on the X on Twitter at JFryDP, JFRYEDP. So this is Justin's top 15. Myles Garrett, number one on the list. Cleveland at Denver this week. Myles Garrett coming off a big game. We'll get into that. So Myles Garrett back at the top of the list at number one here. Number two, Micah Parsons, already played. Number three, Will Anderson Jr. Number four, Danielle Hunter. Number five, TJ Watt. Number six, Max Crosby, already played. Number seven, Josh Hines-Allen. Number 8, Jared Verse. Number 9, Trey Hendrickson. Number 10, Brian Burns, already played. Number 11, Mohamed Diabate from Cleveland. Number 12, Jonathan Greenard, Minnesota. Number 13, Dexter Lawrence, maybe out for the year. We'll talk about that. Number 14, Andrew Van Ginkel. And rounding out the list at 15, Jonathan Cooper from Denver. So I don't have Steve with me to break down this defensive line list, so I'm going to do it solo here. Just a couple caveats on kind of each player here. So looking at the first guy, Myles Garrett. Of course, we know last week, Week 12 versus Pittsburgh, huge game, 5 tackles, 3 sacks. Week 13, the matchup isn't that great. It was a great matchup versus Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's best gives most points to linebackers and defensive linemen right now. But Myles Garrett is going to go against Denver, middle of the pack matchup. Keep in mind, if you're looking for sacks, Myles Garrett is a premium sack getter. Not really, this 5 tackle output. We're not going to be accustomed, or we are not accustomed to it. But Bo Nix, if you're looking for that sack out of Myles Garrett, of course you have Garrett. You're probably throwing him out there. But Bo Nix has only been sacked 19 times in 12 games. Caleb Williams leads the league in sacks, just over 4 a game. So not even 2 a game, not even 1.5 there for, actually it is 1.5 for Bo Nix, 1.5 sacks per game. So not too juicy of a matchup for Myles Garrett, but he's number one on the list. He's a walking bomb at any given time. So is the next guy who has already played on Thanksgiving, and that's Micah Parsons. Had a nice game, 3 tackles, 1.5 sacks versus the Giants, and that was nice to see. Back-to-back games with sacks from Micah, so returning to form. Not too much going well in Dallas right now, but they have been winning some games with Cooper Rush, and Micah Parsons is looking like a tank there. So it was a good game for your box scores there. Moving on to number 3, Will Anderson Jr. 2 tackles, 2 sack game versus Tennessee in Week 12. It was a great matchup, for Will Anderson that game. Week 13, he gets Jacksonville. It's a really bad matchup. Really bad matchup as far as sacks, as far as tackles to defensive linemen here. Houston, this defensive line is awesome. 3 and 4, we'll see another guy for the Texans here, but I just don't know. If you have somebody who's close on this list who, you also roster, or somebody who, when you check out the full rankings, that's just sitting outside the top 15, I think there actually might be other guys that outperform, the Texans defensive line this week. But I'm sure one of them is going to get a sack, whether it be Anderson or Hunter. yeah, just to me, a walking bomb, another guy we've seen kind of round out the form, but it is a bad matchup if that's your kind of thing. If you think Will Anderson Jr. is matchup proof, you start him with confidence, and that's all good too. Number 4, like we said, same team, Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter last week looked like he was wearing the purple again back in Minnesota, 2023. Crazy year last year for him. This year hasn't been as hot, but he has been turning it around. Again, 7 tackles, 3 sacks in one game versus Tennessee. He's not going to get that matchup again. We know it's Jacksonville this week. But I mean, again, somebody you're probably starting if you have them. 5 sacks in the last 2 games. I know it's a bad, matchup. Jacksonville doesn't really concede many sacks, but at the same time, Jacksonville's a mess. So maybe Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson can defy the odds there and find a sack and help your team. Because I don't think they're going to have that, 5-6 tackle output this week. Moving on, number 5, TJ Watt. Down game. I mean, Myles Garrett showed him up last week, only had 4 tackles, no sacks. Week 13, he's going against Cincy. Caveat, in his 13 games played in his career versus Cincy, he's had 50 tackles and 12 sacks. So almost averaging a sack per game. And I believe the two games he played in 2023 against Cincy, I believe one of the games had 2 sacks. The other one he had 1. So pretty good, averaging 1.5 sacks last year in those 2 games. I think he goes out and gets a sack. Probably not looking at more than 4 or 5 tackles, however. But if he can get a sack or 2 or make a forced fumble, then he's definitely going to pay off this week. Moving on to number 6, Max Crosby has already played, but I love him. This is my guy. Max Crosby is another guy who you're not going to bench him if you have him. Especially against KC, gritty matchup in division. So, I mean, he had a great game, 4 tackles with a sack, I believe 2 tackles for loss versus Kansas City. Believe it or not, it was as dull as that was. It was probably his 3rd or 4th best game of the season. Max Crosby has been a little bit down, but hopefully you played him this week. Did have a decent matchup and against Mahomes too. So got to him, got the sack, and made good for us here in fantasy. So Max Crosby, here's the next week. Number 7, this guy's got red flags written all over him. Josh Hines-Allen, only 4 tackles, no sacks over the last 2 games. Houston is only giving up 14 tackles per game to defensive linemen. As that's a horrible, composite number, 14 tackles to defensive linemen. For contrast, Pittsburgh, who I'd mentioned before, allows the most tackles to defensive linemen with 21, averaging 21 a game, and Houston is a third less than that. So, don't look at this game as Josh Hines-Allen's breakout as far as tackles. I don't see it that way. The reason why I think Justin has him up here and we can back him a little bit on this top 15 ranking is because the fact that C.J. Stroud's been sacked the second most in the NFL, 39 times in 12 games, so over 3 sacks a game. Maybe Josh Hines-Allen. What's the other guy there? Trayvon Walker. Maybe they can both get sacks, or both have a chance to, because of the fact that C.J. Stroud's been sacked so much. But don't expect it to be the tackles. It's probably going to be 1 or 1.5 sacks, and that's what you're banking on to start Josh Hines-Allen. But he's been bad, and this is a bad matchup, so red flag on Josh Hines-Allen. Moving on to Jared Verse. Love the matchup, by the way. Last 4 games for Jared Verse, 20 total tackles, so averaging 5 a game, 2 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, a forced fumble, and recovered that fumble. Week 13, he gets New Orleans. Keep in mind, Derek Carr's only been sacked 7 times in 8 games. However, New Orleans is a good matchup because they allow the 7th most tackles to defensive linemen. So Jared Verse, we've seen it in the box score. This is perfect matchup for him. It doesn't have to be getting at the quarterback, which he can do. He's been a tremendous force in the backfield as far as making tackles on opposing running backs in the backfield, racking up tackles, volume tackles as a whole for the defensive lineman position. So I think he has a couple 4 or 5 tackle games the last couple weeks, and this is a good matchup for him as far as tackles. So Jared Verse, I like him. I like this whole Rams defensive line this week versus New Orleans. Love Kobe Turner. We'll get to him later, but yeah, good week if you have the Rams, defensive line. Maybe Rams defense as a whole too. Moving on, number 9, the leading the leading sack getter right now in 2024 in the NFL, and that is Trey Hendrickson from Cincinnati. Leads the NFL with 11.5 sacks. He's got the best matchup you could ask for this week versus Pittsburgh. Russell Wilson has been sacked 16 times in 5 games played, so over 3 times a game. Steelers lead the NFL with giving up 21 tackles per game to the defensive linemen, so you could not ask for any better of a matchup for Trey Hendrickson. If I'm going on FanDuel and betting a sack this week, it's probably going to be Trey Hendrickson getting to Russell Wilson. I think he will get a sack, maybe multiple. We've seen him get 4 in a game. He's a walking bomb, and he's a top 10 play this week, no doubt. So moving on to number 10, Brian Burns already played, down game in a decent matchup. Only had 3 tackles, kept off the box score as far as sacks. 3 tackle game versus Dallas. Probably going to dip a little bit in the rankings come next week, but that's a story for another time. Number 11, Mohamed Diabate. I like what Justin's got here. I mean, this guy's not a mainstream defensive lineman. On Yahoo's listed as a linebacker. I think sleeper, just a linebacker, but he is technically an edge rusher. And keep in mind, this is in a defensive lineman. If he's listed that is in your leagues, he's had 26 tackles and 3 tackles for loss over the last 4 games. So that's over 6 tackles a game and a quarter or 3/4 of a sack per game. So Diabate is kind of sneaky value here. I believe this is going to be the last week without Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. So maybe this is the last we see of Diabate take this premium role, but he has it this week, and he gets Denver, which is not really a juicy matchup. This is actually the 10th worst matchups to defensive linemen when we look at tackles. They only allow 13 tackles per game. Keep in mind, like I'm torn on this one. I like Diabate. I like his tackle. His tackle floor. This is somebody who hasn't got a sack yet this year, and he rushes the quarterback. So maybe if he can rush the quarterback this week, Bo Nix, maybe tackle him or like fault one of those, run him out of bounds and get the sack. I could see that happening for Diabate. So the fact that we're not banking on sacks, we've got a pretty steady tackle floor, and then we can maybe perhaps have that role to get us a sack. Yeah, I think Diabate is a pretty safe floor here. Interested to see this game versus Denver. I don't think it's the matchups we're looking at paper. I don't think in this game Denver is going to show that they're the 10th worst matchup to defensive linemen for some reason. So I think it's a gut call. It's a gutsy rank at number 11, but I can back it. Number 12, this guy's been a walking bomb. I don't know if it stays the same this week though. Number 12, Jonathan Greenard has been absolutely popping off. Last 4 games, 16 tackles, so averaging 4 tackles. Last 4 games, 4 sacks, averaging a sack. 8 tackles for loss in those 4 games. A fumble forced, pass defense. He's just been doing it all. 2 sacks, 6 tackles last week versus Chicago. Keep in mind, though, when you look at this game, you look at Greenard, you look at Van Ginkel, they were supposed to do this, man. I mean, Caleb Williams, we said, over 4 sacks a game. So this was their game to tear it up. Granted, they both did, so props to them. But looking forward instead of looking back now, Week 13 matchup versus Arizona. Kyler Murray has only been sacked 20 times in 11 games played. Not a great ratio there. And the Cardinals only allow 12 tackles per game on average to defensive linemen. So Greenard, a lot of people will say, oh, Van Ginkel's been, so good. He should be number 1 every week. Not this week, not Jonathan Greenard either. As great as he's been, I think Justin did a good job of not really, sometimes we get, focused on looking behind us is what a player has done instead of looking kind of forward. And I think, this is a fair ranking looking forward. Number 12 with Greenard. Number 13, Dexter Lawrence. Here we go. Dexter Lawrence had a 3 tackle game versus Dallas Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, he dislocated his, I believe, elbow. As of now, he's expected to be out the year. So not only did he lay a stinker for you on Thanksgiving, he's expected to be not serviceable on your team for the rest of the year. So hang on to him right now. I wouldn't exactly drop him yet. He's a tough guy. He might be back in a couple weeks if you can hold out. But, if not, absolutely you can drop him. Probably going to be out multiple weeks at least. But the expectation is right now he is going to be out the year. Yikes. Not going to be on this list probably next week or the week after. So Dexter Lawrence, here's to your health. Cheers, buddy. Moving on next, Andrew Van Ginkel. Here he is at 14. Third game in a row with a sack for Van Ginkel. And to make it maybe more perhaps impressive, 7 tackles last week versus Chicago. Again, same kind of song and dance here as with Greenard. Van Ginkel in that game versus Chicago, he was supposed to do this. Yes, he's a beast. He's a walking bomb at any given time. Now, could he defy the odds and do well and be a top 10 play this week? Absolutely. It's Andrew Van Ginkel. We don't have to bank on, anything. We can get sacks. We can get picks. We can get pick sixes. It doesn't really matter. He's involved so fluidly in the defense there in Minnesota. The thing is, though, it's this matchup, this Week 13 matchup with Arizona. Again, Kyler Murray, not even 2 sacks a game. They're only allowing as a team 11 tackles to opposing defensive linemen collectively. So Van Ginkel and Greenard, there might be 12 tackles. Those 12 tackles might go to them. And then that could be a serviceable amount of tackles for you. But keep in mind, Kyler Murray scrambles a lot. He's nimble. This might not be a game to get this sack. So just keep that in mind with those 2 guys. I know it's tough to sit them if you do have them, and they're both on this top 15 list. So unless you're in a super shallow league, you're probably throwing them out there and seeing what it do. And finally, number 15, Jonathan Cooper. Had a 3 tackle and a half sack performance in a cake matchup versus Las Vegas last week, week 12. This week he gets Cleveland, which on paper is a bad matchup, but actually since the last 3 games specifically, Jacoby Brissett's been the quarterback, and things have gotten a little bit better. The numbers, the tackles given to opposing defensive linemen has come up by, I believe, 1.5 points. Brissett also has gotten sacked 18 times in 6 games. That's an average of 3 a game. That'll do. So plenty of opportunity here for Denver, not only to be at home, but maybe the way they've been playing, be up in this game. Doesn't look like Cleveland's going to have Cedric Tillman this week. Still didn't pass the protocol. I know it's a Monday game, but I don't think he plays, so that hurts their offense. And maybe without him, a big part of their offense recently, that Jonathan Cooper can get at Jameis Winston at least one of those 3 times. So this might be a game where Denver has more than 3 sacks, and I think you want to any shares you have of Denver, also of LA Rams, any defensive lineman shares that you have, throw them out there with confidence. So that's the top 15 there. Before we move into linebackers, I just wanted to mention a couple honorable mentions, as I always do. These guys did not fall short from the list. But if you're sitting there on the fence with somebody like Greenard, and you're somebody who's looking at the matchup, if you throw the matchup away, then start them. But if you are somebody that's really looking in the matchups, then here's some guys that have some great matchups this week. As I already mentioned, Kobe Turner, a Rams defensive lineman versus New Orleans, gives up a lot of tackles to defensive linemen. I think we'll see a high dose of Alvin Kamara and just plays out the middle, whether it be to Taysom Hill in the slot, running the ball. I don't think that these Rams have to get to Derek Carr to have a day. I think they can do it on on tackles, unless you're in a league where you're getting half a point for a solo tackle. Then I think these guys are good starts. If you're not getting points for tackles, then Kobe Turner's probably not your guy. Next is Zack Baun, another Denver lineman. Nick Bonito, another Denver lineman. Love this matchup versus Cleveland. Exploit it. I'm pretty sure if you have Zack Baun and Nick Bonito, you're probably throwing them out there. And you should with confidence. I think this is a great matchup. Very likely chance that one of those guys or both get a sack. And finally, for somebody in a very deep league out there, they probably know this guy. He is a household name, but blood clots forced Christian Barmore to miss the first, I believe, half of the year. It was out indefinitely. We're lucky to see him back, but he has been getting his snaps back. He has been ramping up. and he does get a top 10 matchup versus Indy this week as regards to the defensive line position. Only owned in 1% of Yahoo leagues. So if you're somebody who maybe you're in a deeper league and you're looking for the next man up, Christian Barmore might not be owned out there, and he might be able to help you during the stretch run if you're looking to make a stretch run in the playoffs. So those are guys who can also have success that are outside this top 15. As always, if you want to go look at the rest of this list, go to rankings when you're a subscriber. Hover over rankings and then go to now weekly linebackers. We're going to check out my linebacker list. So coming in at number 1, Zaire Franklin, man, just leading the league in tackles, looking sturdy as ever. He's my number 1 this week. Number 2, EJ Speed. I know I talked him up last week, but yeah, I'm coming to face the facts. Zaire Franklin, you just can't pass up that consistency. But EJ Speed, to me, I mean, these guys are Batman and Robin. Number 3, Zack Baun, somebody who's been creeping up for a while. Number 4, I got Foye Oluokun. Number 5, Roquan Smith versus Philly. Number 6, Spillane, already played. Number 7, Bobby Wagner. 8, Logan Wilson. 9, Eric Kendricks. 10, Frankie Louvu. 11, Daiyan Henley. Number 12, Nakobe Dean. 13, Kenneth Murray Jr. 14, Ernest Jones. And 15, Quay Walker, already played. So looking at this number 1 spot, first and foremost, I had mentioned Zaire Franklin leads the NFL with 123 tackles in 12 games, averaging over 10 tackles per game. Anytime you have somebody doing that, you're absolutely elite. You're a top 5 linebacker. It doesn't matter, what year it is, if it's 2016 or 2024. He's got a top 8 matchup. And this kind of goes for speed too. Both of these guys, I think so highly of them. Almost interchangeable, based on who's going to have the better week. EJ Speed, 7 out of 11 games played with 10 or more double-digit tackle games. So 11 last week versus Dallas. He's straight up rolling. Both of these guys are rolling. Both got a top 8 matchup versus New England. So, Franklin, Speed, send them out there and, be giddy when they rack in the tackles. Number 3, Zack Baun. I kind of called it last week, taking my victory lap on that one. I still had him in the top 3 just because his upside, but I did mention that it was a horrible matchup for Baun. Actually, as a matter of fact, he's had 2 bad matchups on paper, which he's excelled. So kind of gave me the confidence to keep him up that high in the rankings, but he crashed for us, only 3 tackles. I think this week versus Baltimore, not saying Baltimore is like a top 5, matchup, but I think this is kind of like a top 5 game. The Philly Eagles and Baltimore Ravens. I think this is a great game. I think there's going to be plenty of Lamar Jackson carrying the ball down the field, plenty of opportunities for Zack Baun to be in the mix, with Derrick Henry running up the middle. I could see this being an 8 to 10 tackle game for Zack Baun, and we've all seen his upside. He puts up 14, 15 tackles in the right game script. So anytime you have that ability, until last week, we would have set a safe floor. But 5 points last week. This is not a bad matchup. This is, middle of the road at worst. So Zack Baun, don't be scared of last week. Fire him up with confidence. Number 4, getting back to 100% of snaps finally, is Foye Oluokun. I know there's some great linebackers out there, but I cannot rank him, lower than this. To me, he's healthy. He's playing 100% of snaps, 37 tackles in the last 4 games. Like, Foyer's back. I know he's got a bottom 8 matchup versus Houston, but most importantly, Foyer's healthy. We all know his tantalizing upside. If you put him on your bench, you're probably going to watch him go off for 20 points or more, and you're going to regret it. So Foye, I know it's a tough matchup, but hey, in this game, maybe Houston gets up, so much that they can just run the ball with Joe Mixon, or that's their game plan. I don't think they're going to be needing to throw all game. So I think game script kind of goes in Foyer's side. Even though looking at the bad matchup, I think he's matchup proof here. Number 5, Roquan Smith, healthy. Most important, another guy. Most important is just healthy. 11 games, 110 tackles, 1 tackle under averaging 10 a game. This week, returns to form, gets a top 5 matchup versus Philly in a get-right spot. So I think Roquan, we just mentioned a guy Franklin averaging over 10 tackles a game. Roquan fits that bill. Boom, top 5 linebacker. Simple as that. Number 6, moving on. Robert Spillane did me well, making me look good in these rankings. He had 9 tackles versus Kansas City. So it was a good game for Spillane. Number 7, Bobby Wagner, 8 tackles in back-to-back games now. We've seen him kind of dip middle of the season. But, if he had a horrible matchup, I'm probably not having him at number 7 here. But, the fact that he gets Tennessee's a great matchup. I believe it's top 8 as far as tackles against linebackers. So, 12th most linebacker tackles given up for Tennessee. So it's a great matchup. I like both of these guys. We'll get into Louisville a little bit, down the list here. But yeah, Bobby Wagner, back-to-back games with 8. He's putting us at ease. He's back in a great matchup. Tony Pollard, healthier. They're probably going to go back Tyjae Spears, focus on that run game. I know Calvin Ridley's a little banged up too, so I think this is the perfect storm for Washington linebackers. Moving on, number 8, I have Logan Wilson. He is questionable right now with a knee injury, but I do expect him to play versus Pittsburgh. He hasn't practiced all week. He's a vet, doesn't really need to. Versus Pittsburgh, this is the best matchup, and that's one of the reasons he's still up this high as truly questionable coming into this week. But Pittsburgh is giving up 19.5 tackles to linebackers a game. So great matchup. Can't pass it up if he plays. If he plays, you're starting him. I'm sure he's going to play 100% of snaps. I don't think a vet like him is going to need a limited role. I expect him to be back there rounding out the form. Number 9, Eric Kendricks, I have on the list. He already played. Man, does he make me look good this week. 10 tackles and a sack on Thanksgiving. I didn't have Overshown in here. I'm not going to take that credit, but had it not been for the pick 6, Kendricks would have had the better game. But yeah, cheers to you if you started Overshown. Number 10, I had mentioned Washington linebackers. Here's Frankie Louvu, just on a tear right now. 25 tackles and 3 sacks over the last 3 games. So that's as a linebacker who's averaging over 8 tackles and a sack per game over the last 3. So very impressive numbers. Maybe he's finding his form in that Dan Quinn role. He's got a good matchup versus Tennessee. I think this is a good week for Frankie Louvu. Not somebody who I believe has ever made my top 15 list because I do focus on tackles, but seems to be that time of year where Frankie Louvu is hitting. So get it while the getting's good, and this is a great matchup for it. So Frankie Louvu, number 10. Number 11, questionable with a calf injury right now, Daiyan Henley. This guy's just a walking bomb. 10 or more tackles in 5 straight. I don't have the number off of my head, but let me know another linebacker or 2 who have done that the last 5 games. He's expected to play. Keep in mind, it is a bad matchup. I mean, somebody who's averaged over 10 tackles a game the last 5 games, by my logic, would be top 5. But he is questionable, and it is a bad matchup. Bottom 5 matchup versus Atlanta. So temper expectations a bit, but I would not be surprised if we see a 6th consecutive 10-tackle game by Daiyan Henley again here versus Atlanta. So if you have him, deeper league, you're starting him. If he starts, you're starting him, no doubt about it. Number 12, Nakobe Dean. 18 tackles and a sack over the last 2 games. He's kind of dipped there in the middle of the year. Another guy who kind of fell off, but quickly gained that back. Nice splits over the last 2 games, averaging 9 tackles. So it's got a decent matchup versus Baltimore. I had mentioned just like Baun. Decent matchup when we look on paper, but I think this is actually an upper level matchup due to the game. Just these 2 teams, great teams. Baltimore and Philly. I think it's going to be a great game for not only Nakobe Dean, but Zack Baun as well. Moving on, number 13, I have this is my bold take of the list here. I think very unpopular opinion, but I have Kenneth Murray here at number 13. And for as far as Kenneth Murray goes, 17 tackles, a sack, and a pick the last 2 games. Top 12 matchup versus Washington. I expect Washington to be up in this game, running the ball. They're going to have Brian Robinson Jr. still, even though Eckler's out. I still expect them to be up, running the ball heavy, and that's great game script for Kenneth Murray. And, I mean, looking at the last 2 weeks, I could say the last 4 and the numbers wouldn't be so sexy. But those last two games, the reason why I'm putting so much weight on them is because that's when we lost Jack Gibbens, and Jerome Baker came back into the starting lineup, or I should say, started in the starting lineup. In those last two games, I mean, Kenneth Murray's been all over the place. When Gibbens was hitting there, it was kind of like Murray was taking the back role, kind of like the safety position when Damari Richardson was starting in Carolina. Xavier Woods kind of fell off, but Richardson's not there. Woods is back. Same kind of thing here. So I think Jerome Baker, even though he's the starting linebacker next to Murray, I think as far as Murray owners go, it works wonders having Jerome Baker there versus Jack Gibbens. Jack Gibbens was taking up all the tackles versus now Jack Gibbens isn't there. It looks like Murray's the bang man that we're expecting. We've come to expect it coming into the preseason. So I like Kenneth Murray a lot. I have him over. I didn't mention Jermaine Pratt, somebody who I usually have on this top 15 list, but I'm taking out because I do think Logan Wilson plays. And even though it's a number one matchup versus Pittsburgh, I just don't think he has the same kind of floor that a guy like Kenneth Murray has shown the last 2 weeks. So very high on him this week. Starting with confidence. You can see I have him listed over. I'll go over guys that didn't even make this cut who I have him over. That's how high I am on Murray this week. Moving on, number 14, bad matchup, but I just can't take him out of the top 15. That is Ernest Jones. I mean, 47 tackles the last 4 games. That's an average of 11 3/4, almost 12 tackles a game. Like I mentioned, horrible matchup versus the Jets, only allowing 14.5 tackles per game to the linebacker position. But Ernest Jones has just been rolling, and this is somebody who, I'm not obviously if I think he's gonna have 10 tackles, surely I'm probably gonna have him top 5, top 6. But this is a bad matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if he had 10 tackles, but that's why he's still up this high. But just a horrible matchup versus the Jets. Excited to see what he does. I'm saying 6 to 10 tackles. I'm taking it vague here. You might get lucky or you might be let down. So if you have somebody like Kenneth Murray, this might be a better week to play him over Ernest Jones, surprisingly, my opinion. And finally, 15 here for the linebackers. That is Quay Walker. He already played. Made me look good again. 10 tackles, a sack, and 2 tackles for loss versus Miami. Anytime Quay Walker's on that field, especially in a decent matchup or a good matchup like Miami, great time to start him, and especially if he's healthy. So when he's healthy, he's out there doing his thing and putting 20 points up for your team, and that's what he did this week. Now, for some guys who didn't make the cut, I'll give my rationale. So I had at 13 Kenneth Murray Jr. I was having a tough time this week with these rankings. Jermaine Pratt versus Pittsburgh. It looks great on paper, but I think Logan Wilson is going to take he's going to play in this game, which obviously is going to, keep Jermaine Pratt at his role not elevated. If Wilson does not play, then sure, Jermaine Pratt makes my top 15. But right now, he's had 3 games ago, 1 tackle. He had 8 tackles back-to-back games. Maybe that's good for you. But to me, top 15 linebackers, Quay Walker, all these guys above have that potential to have 10 or more tackles. It seemed like this season things were going to change. For Pratt, he had inconsistent years. 5-6 years now, just 20 points. Then you go to pick him up and he has 4. So that's not going to fly. So maybe that's a little bit of what's coming back for Jermaine Pratt. But yeah, he just right outside my top 15 this week. But yeah, Jermaine Pratt, I have Kenneth Murray over him. Fred Warner playing with what I hear is a dislocated ankle. Of course, that's going to hurt my opinion on Fred Warner. If he gets 10 tackles, I wouldn't be surprised. But in a game where Buffalo isn't as juicy as a matchup as you'd think, they're about middle of the pack as far as tackles allowed to the linebacker position. Fred Warner, we've seen have back-to-back stinkers. Maybe that ankle is affecting him. So, yeah, he's out of my top 15 this week. Caden Ellis versus the Chargers this week. On paper, it's a great matchup, and Caden Ellis has been the guy, the bang man there in the middle, and I expect him to have that same role. But these were games without Troy Anderson, without Nate Landman, a few of them. Now, I know Landman has been playing, but now we're going to get Troy Anderson back. If you look to the beginning of the season when all 3 of them were healthy, they were kind of negating each other and just playing big roles, each of them, and kind of like that situation we saw in Jacksonville. So Caden Ellis probably going to get you 6 or 7 tackles, his lower 10 or 12-point outcomes. But yeah, I'm not really too high on him when these other guys are back, even though it's a great matchup. Next is Jamien Sherwood. Jamien Sherwood is going to play the Rams this week. I know it's, not to say it's a good matchup. It's a bad matchup as it is. Now we get whispers of C.J. Mosley coming back. I know there was a game or two when Mosley came back in the season, and we thought Sherwood was going to go downhill. He had a fantastic game. I believe it was versus Houston. 2 sacks in that game. So, Sherwood wasn't affected at all. But I'm not sure this time around, and especially in a bad matchup, he's not far outside my top 15. But, yeah, again, going back to him, Kenneth Murray, I'd rather have him this week. And finally, I'm not sure exactly, the situation of Matt Milano. Forgive me for that. It is Friday right now, but I'm not sure if Matt Milano is going to come back, who that's going to affect. You saw that neither Terrell Bernard nor Dorian Williams were on my top 15 list. I'm kind of a wait and see approach. Yeah, Matt Milano, if you're in a very deep league, pick him up, stash him, see where it goes. But I mean, the way these guys are playing, and I know the way that Matt Milano has played, very tough. It's like hot and cold coming together and making a tornado there in Buffalo. I'm not sure what they're going to do. This is kind of a bad week to start one of these guys with confidence, especially if you're looking to clinch a playoff spot, if you're on the outside looking in. So some other better options outside there. I mean, Dorian Williams, he could play 100% of snaps and have a great game, or you can play 4% because Matt Milano is back. So really do your due diligence on that one. Check actives and inactives before you fire those Buffalo linebackers up. Now, finally, we are going to move into our last section, the top 15 for our defensive back. So once again, I'm going to hover over rankings and just go to weekly DB here. Now, I preface this with Nazeeh Johnson. I didn't have a number. That's why he's showing number 1 on top. But, bad game for him. I believe I had him maybe 20 or 22, something like that. But, yeah, he let me down at cornerbacks. See what happens when you trust them cornerbacks? All right, number 1, Nick Cross. Number 2, Budda Baker. Number 3, Kyle Hamilton. Number 4, Kevin Byard. Number 5, Julian Love. Number 6, Antoine Winfield. Number 7, Brandon Jones. Number 8, Jesse Bates. Number 9, Xavier Woods. 10, Trayvon Merrick. 11, Alontae Taylor. 12, Brian Branch. 13, Derwin James. 14, Tyler Nubin. And 15, Taylor Rapp. So starting here with Nick Cross. Nick Cross gets the nod. Decent matchup versus New England, about middle of the road. You can contrast him with Budda Baker. They're both great options. The reason why I have Nick Cross number 1 is he's got a middle of the tier matchup, whereas Budda Baker has almost the worst of the worst, the second worst matchup you could have. Both of these guys, you're starting them, you're rolling them out if you have them, unless you have some spectacular other options, or you're only starting one defensive back, and you can easily find another solid replacement. But Nick Cross, half his games, 6 out of 12 games, 10 or more tackles. A linebacker to do that is outstanding. For a safety to do that is even more impressive. This week, I'm not scared by the matchup versus New England. I think Mac Jones actually, deceives us when we look on that paper. Majority of games have not come with Mac Jones. So, I think they've been better the last 4 or 5 games, 2 opposing safeties. So Nick Cross, fire him up with confidence. Budda Baker, I'm a little bit scared here. 107 tackles in 11 games, almost averaging that 10 tackles per game that Cross is. But the Vikings only allow 11 tackles to the safety position. We've seen it before. They play the Rams, Quentin Lake, Cam Curl let us down. Multiple duos have let us down playing against the Minnesota Vikings. And, it's on paper, it's like, how does that make sense? They throw the ball often. They have Justin Jefferson, Hawkinson back now. I know they have Aaron Jones to run the ball a lot. And it's kind of surprising to me. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But, yeah, Minnesota is a horrible matchup. Budda Baker, sure, he can still get his 8 to 10 tackles. That's what you're hoping. That's why you're playing him. But keep in mind, the stats are not looking good as far as this matchup. Number 3, decent matchup here for Kyle Hamilton at Philly. Had a horrible matchup and a horrible box score last week versus the Chargers. I believe the Chargers give up the 3rd least amount of points to amount of tackles to safeties. So he only had 3 tackles. I'm kind of checking that. box and throwing it out the window. I'm not really too worried about it. I think Philadelphia is going to be a darn good matchup for Kyle Hamilton this week. I'm expecting him to put up his 6 to 8 standard tackles here with some upside. Might get a sack, might get a pick, might get a forced fumble. That's what you get with Kyle Hamilton, and that's why I'm willing to keep guys like Budda Baker, Hamilton up here, even without great matchups. So Kyle Hamilton, hopefully he's back to full health. It looked good the last game. No re-aggravations, anything like that. So he should be ready to roll in a huge matchup. So give me all Kyle Hamilton shares out there. Number 4, made a good call on this one, Kevin Byard. Nedrick Brisker for the rest of the year. So keep riding Kevin Byard with confidence. In a right matchup, he's a great play. This was a right matchup this week versus Detroit. He ended with 10 tackles. Phenomenal. Number 5, Julian Love. Only 2 tackles last week. Also had 2 passes defensed. Number 5 is extremely generous for Julian Love. I like this guy so much. I can't take him out of my top 5, but keep in mind this is a Jets offense who's only giving up 10.5 tackles per game to safeties collectively. So Julian Love, anytime he can get 8 to 10 tackles, but they're only allowing 8 to 10 tackles to two safeties. So if you split that in half, just over 5 tackles. So expect to be let down, but hope for the best with Julian Love if you are forced to throw him out there. Number 6, Antoine Winfield. Maybe a little bit safer of a play. Had 6 tackles and a sack in Week 12 versus the Giants. The only bad thing about Winfield is he has a horrible Week 13 matchup versus Carolina, just about as bad as the Jets. So Antoine Winfield, he's a great player. Anytime you have a safety out there who can get a sack or a pick, forced fumble, those big splash plays, pass defense. If you're in a league where you get that's your bread and butter. I'm confident with Winfield this year. I just think that the tackles are a little bit of a risk this week. So Antoine Winfield's still a top 6 safety to me. Number 7, this guy gets a little bump in the rankings due to matchup, and that's Brandon Jones. Love Brandon Jones this week. Missed the game two games ago. Came back last week. We were thinking, is he going to be a little bit hampered? Believe he played all the snaps. Ended with 5 tackles, a pick, and 2 passes defensed. And you know what? This matchup versus Cleveland, again, Jameis Winston has not been the quarterback the entire year, so you can't really judge it on paper, but you can look in the last 3 and find out that the Browns have gave up more. They're trending up. They're giving up more points to safeties now that Jameis Winston is a quarterback, which is a good thing. So Brandon Jones, I like him. Seems to have a safe floor, and I think this is a great matchup for him to continue to show that safe floor. Number 8, Jesse Bates. Week 11, before the bye week, was on bye last week. This guy had 10 tackles. It's Jesse Bates. Why is he down here at number 8? Well, the reason is he's playing the Chargers this week, and the Chargers are straight up a bottom 3 matchup. We saw Kyle Hamilton last week versus the Chargers, 3 tackles. If Kyle Hamilton only had 3 tackles, I don't want it. So Jesse Bates might be a guy to fade this week, even if I'm in a league where I'm starting 2, and I have somebody that's sitting at 18 or 20 on this list, and I like them. I like the matchup. I might take them over Jesse Bates this week. I just don't see it for him in Week 13. I do like this guy, Xavier Woods. I had mentioned already. Came off last week, Week 12, 8 tackles and a tackle for loss versus Kansas City, and that was a generous matchup. So he was expected to do well. I think we saw Brandon Jones. Winfield back-to-back 10 or more tackle games to safeties. So I was expecting this 6 to 8 tackle game for Woods. He ended up having 8. And he also gets a top 10 matchup this week versus Tampa Bay. So I don't think things have really gotten worse. I'm kind of looking at the same kind of game. We know that Baker Mayfield's going to throw the ball a lot. So I think Xavier Woods in division game is going to be needed. He helps in run protection. He makes tackles tackles behind the line. So he's going to be up there, stuff in the middle. Give me some Xavier Woods as a top 10 play. Number 10, let me down. I will be the first to say it. I'll take my loss here. Trayvon Merrick. I was throwing the last 2 games out. He was still playing 100% of snaps. I got to check the alignments at this point. I'm not sure if his rotation, his role has kind of switched there. But, yeah, he's kind of unplayable right now after a third single-digit performance. Only 3 tackles this week, and it was against the Kansas City I was excited. Kansas City, like I just mentioned, Brandon Jones, Antoine Winfield. I think there was 2 or 3 safeties back to back to back, 10 or more tackles against the Chiefs. I thought the magic was in the water. I was wrong. Trayvon Merrick is now somebody who I'm telling you to sit as far as week 14 and moving forward until he can show that early season form we saw out of him. So bad call by there. I'm sorry to all you people. Number 11, Alontae Taylor has been rolling 17 tackles and 2 passes defense the last 2 games, averaging 8.5 tackles a game over those last 2. He's playing the Rams. The Rams are giving up 15 tackles to cornerbacks per game. This is a game, if you have Alontae, you want to start him. I know all the time, I preach, or in the community we preach, start defensive backs over safeties, but start cornerbacks over safeties. And that is a general rule I believe in, but not here, not now. I really like Alontae Taylor this week. I think he's going to get you that 14, 15 points that you're looking for to help you get into the playoffs. So against the Rams, love this matchup. He's been rolling. Alontae Taylor's a good play. Number 12, kind of had a middle-of-the-pack game. Brian Branch, 6 tackles versus Chicago. We knew there was some potential for a bad game here with bad quarterback play from Caleb Williams, and until the second half, that's what it was, and things kind of got better there for the second half. But 12 points if you get 2 points solo, 12 points for Brian Branch, you'll take that. Didn't hurt you really this week, but didn't really help you either. Making his return to the list, Derwin James here at 13. Derwin James has kind of found his old form. 16 tackles and 1.5 sacks the last 2 games. Good for an average of 8 tackles and 3/4 of a sack. Top 3 matchup this week versus Atlanta. Love it. Combined with his last 2 games, he's found his form in good matchups. Now he comes to a even better matchup, great matchup, top 3 versus Atlanta. And, he's hitting on all cylinders. I believe the matchup plus the priors over the last 2 weeks has put him in a good spot. So good week to fire up Derwin James. He might be dropped in your league. You might be able to pick him up and start him with confidence this week. Number 14, walking bomb. That's Tyler Nubin. Should have put him a little bit higher, but he has been inconsistent this year. But as of recent, back-to-back games with 12 tackles, back-to-back games, and over 10 is impressive. Back-to-back with 12. Now you're going to be a top 10 play next week. I know the matchup's not going to be as good next week, but anytime you have somebody who can get 10 or more tackles consistently, like Jeremy Chin, but Jeremy Chin's not on this list, unfortunately. But Nubin, and it was a good matchup versus Dallas. I know, it wasn't great, but it was a pretty good matchup, and he really excelled expectations. So Tyler Nubin is somebody who's probably going to be on this list again next week and move up quite possibly in the rankings. Looking good for that promising young rookie. And finally, no Damar Hamlin. He's not far behind, but I do have Taylor Rapp from Buffalo above. Don't get me wrong, both of these guys are great plays. Taylor Rapp has been the better play over the last, I want to say, 3 or 4 weeks. Over the last 3 games, Taylor Rapp has had 23 tackles, and San Francisco allows the absolute most points to safety. So both of these guys, if you have Damar Hamlin, you're in a deeper league, you'll probably still start him, and I recommend it. Probably good for 10 to 12 points. But I think Taylor Rapp, if I had to pick between one of these guys right now, I'm picking Taylor Rapp just based on the last 2 or 3 games. Both of these guys playing 100%. Again, I haven't looked too deep into it to say, is the alignment shifting? I don't know what it is, but Taylor Rapp, I preached him all preseason. Love this guy, and, both are fine starts, but give me Rapp this week. As always, thanks for viewing, listening, watching. If you have comments, drop them in the comments section. If you think one of my rankings is whack, let me know. That's cool too. I'm here for you. Thank you to all those people who give me nice comments, listen, and best of luck in your Week 13 playoff, upcoming playoff matchup. Hopefully you get the arrows pointed in the right direction for your rest of your fantasy season. If you are a subscriber, I appreciate it. If not, once again, go to idpplus.com/membership and use the promo code PROPS for that 20% off. Until week 14, best of luck. We will see you next time on IDP Plus Trends.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.